5. 17, 18. Then Stephen was seized and stoned to death, but not before he bore witness against his persecutors, saying, Which one of the prophets did your forefathers not persecute? Yes, they killed those who made announcement in advance concerning the coming of the righteous one, whose betrayers and murderers you have now become. Acts 7. 52-60. See also Hab 11. 36, 37. The murder of Stephen was followed by a great siege of persecution led in part by Saul of Tarsus, the results of which scattered the Jerusalem congregation far and wide, but thereby extended the activity of preaching the good news. Act 8. 1-4. 9. 1, 2 later, Herod Agrippa had James the brother of John slain with the sword, and probably would have done the same thing to Peter had not the angel of Jehovah miraculously rescued him in the dead of night. Act 12. 1-11. With his conversion to Christianity, Saul the persecutor became Paul the persecuted, as he says, by Jehovah's undeserved kindness. This occurred when he finally came to appreciate that he was fighting against the Lord himself. Act 9. 4, 5. 22. 4, 7, 8. 26. 11, 14, 15. 1 Co 15. 9. Go 1. 13, 23. php 3. 6. The account of his ministry and travels thereafter tells how Paul, in turn, experienced much persecution at the hands of Christianity's enemies. Act 13. 50. 2 Co 6. 3-5. 11. 23-25. 5. 11. 2t3. 10, 11. Persecution of Christians by the authorities of the Roman Empire from and after the days of Nero is a matter of secular history. See Christian. The charges varied, but the objectives always seemed to be the same, namely, the suppression of Christianity. Proper attitude toward persecution. If one keeps God's commandments as a Christian, it is impossible to escape persecution, for all those desiring to live with godly devotion in association with Christ Jesus will also be persecuted. 2t3. 12. Yet true Christians are able to endure all manner of wicked persecution and still maintain a happy attitude free of malice and hatred of the persecutors. This is because they understand the issues involved, the source of the persecution and why it is permitted. Instead of being puzzled and worried over such experiences, they rejoice to share with Christ in the test of loyalty under persecution. 1 Pe 4. 12-14. The Christian, however, must be certain that what he suffers is really for a righteous cause. The Bible account and pattern allow for no mixing in politics, plotting of conspiracies, and or any type of criminal activities as the basis for one's being persecuted. Giving particular stress to this, the Apostle urges, maintain your conduct fine among the nations, that, in the thing in which they are speaking against you as evildoers, they may as a result textoi acute miritra longo. Persia, Persians 611. Judah knew that was also in Christ Jesus, who became obedient as far as death, yes, death on a torture stake. php 2. 5-8. For the joy that was set before Jesus he endured a torture stake, despising shame. Hope 12. 2. See also 2 Co 12. 10. 2th1. 4. 1 Pe 2. 21-23. The Christian's attitude toward the persecutors themselves is also an important factor. Loving one's enemies and blessing those opposed enables a person to endure. Mount 5. 44. Row 12. 14. 1 Co 4. 12, 13. This too the Christian knows. Anyone forsaking home and relatives for the sake of the kingdom of heaven is promised 100-fold more, but with persecutions also. Mr. 10. 29, 30. It is true that not everyone who hears the good news of the kingdom will endure the heat of persecution, and some may attempt to sidestep the issues to avoid trouble. Mount 13. 21. G 6. 12. But it is better to rely on Jehovah's strength, praying as David did for deliverance from the persecutors, knowing he will not leave his servants in the lurch. Then one will be able to say with the apostle, "We are coming off completely victorious through him that loved us." PS 7. 1. 2 Co 4. 9, 10. Row 8. 35-37. Persia, Persians. A land and a people regularly mentioned in association with the Medes, both in the Bible and in secular history. The Medes and Persians evidently were related peoples of the ancient Aryan Indo-Iranian tribes, and this would make the Persians descendants of Japheth, perhaps through Madai, the common ancestor of the Medes. GE 10. 2 In an inscription, Darius the Great calls himself a Persian, son of a Persian, an Aryan, of Aryan seed. History of the Persian Empire, by A. Olmsted, 1948, p. 123. Assyrian inscriptions relating to the time of Shalmaneser III, evidently a contemporary of Jehu of Israel, mention an invasion of Media and the receiving of tribute from kings of Parsua, a region apparently situated to the W of Lake Umia and bordering on Assyria. Many scholars consider Parsua to be the name then applied to the land of the Persians, though others would associate it with the Parthians. At any rate, in later inscriptions the Persians are placed considerably more to the s, being settled in Parsa to the south of Elam in what is now the province of Fars in modern Iran. Anshan, a district or city bordering Elam and once within its domain, was also occupied by the Persians. Thus, in their early history the Persians seem to have held only the southwestern portion of the extensive Iranian plateau, their boundaries being Elam and Media on the MW, Parthia on the N, Kumania on the E, and the Persian Gulf on the Essence. With the exception of the hot, humid coastlands of the Persian Gulf, the land mainly consisted of the southern portion of the rugged Zagros mountain range, broken by long and quite fertile valleys having well-wooded slopes. The climate in the valleys is temperate, but on the higher plateau regions the arid, windswept lands experience severe cold in the winter months. Like the Medes, the Persians appear to have done much stock raising, along with necessary agriculture, and Persian King Darius the Great proudly described his native land as beautiful and rich in horses and men. Encyclopaedia Britannica, 1959, Volume 17, p. 603. Originally leading a somewhat austere, often nomadic life, the Persians manifested a great love for luxury and luxurious surroundings during the period of the empire. Compare is 1. 3-7. Also the clothing given to Mordecai, 8. 15. Sculptures at Persepolis represent the Persians as dressing with flowing, ankle-length robes, girded at the waist, and wearing low-laced shoes. By contrast, the Medes are depicted as wearing a tight, long-sleeved coat ending near the knee. Picture, Volume 2, p. 328. Both Persians and Medes apparently made use of trousers. Persian soldiers are shown wearing trousers and sleeved tunics over iron-scaled armor. They were expert horsemen, o textoi acute miritra longo, Persia, Persian 612. His leadership. Herodotus, I, 107, 108. Cyropedia, I, 2, until then the Medes had been dominant over the Persians, but Cyrus gained a swift victory over Median king Astyages and captured his capital city of Ecbatana 550 BCE. Compared I-8. 3, 20. The Median Empire thus came under the control of the Persians. Although the Medes continued subservient to the Persians during the remainder of the Achaemenid dynasty, there can be no doubt as to the dual nature of the empire that resulted. Thus, the book History of the Persian Empire p. 37 says, "The close relationship between Persians and Medes was never forgotten. Plundered Ecbatan remained a favorite royal residence. Medes were honored equally with Persians. They were employed in high office and were chosen to lead Persian armies. Foreigners spoke regularly of the Medes and Persians. When they used a single term, it was the Mede. Under Cyrus, the Medo-Persian Empire expanded farther reaching to the Aegean Sea as a result of the Persian victory over King Croesus of Lydia and the subjugation of certain Greek coastal cities. His major conquest, however, came in 539 BCE when Cyrus, at the head of a combined force of Medes, Persians, and Elamites, took mighty Babylon, in fulfillment of the biblical prophecies. Isra 21. 2, 9, 44, 26, 45, 7, 5. 28. With Babylon's fall came the end of a long period of Semitic supremacy, now superseded by the first dominant world power of Aryan Japhetic descent. It also brought the land of Judah as well as Syria and Phoenicia within the Medo-Persian domain. By Cyrus' decree, in 537 BCE the exiled Jews were allowed to return to their homeland, which had lain desolate for exactly 70 years. 2 ch. 36. 20-23. See Cyrus. Persian capitals. In keeping with the dual nature of the empire, a Mede named Darius became the ruler of the defeated Chaldean kingdom, though likely not independent from Cyrus' suzerainty. Da 5. 31. 9. 1. See Darius number 1. Babylon continued as a royal city of the Medo-Persian Empire, as well as a religious and commercial center. However, the torrid summers there generally seem to have been more than the Persian emperors wanted to endure, so Babylon seldom served as more than a winter location for them. There is archaeological evidence that, following the conquest of Babylon, Cyrus soon returned to Ecbatana, modern Hamadan, situated over 1,900 meters, 6,200 feet above sea level at the foot of Mount Alwand, where winters of heavy snow and bitter cold are balanced by delightful summers. It was at Ecbatana that Cyrus' memorandum concerning the reconstruction of Jerusalem's temple was found several years after it had been issued. As 6. 2-5 The earlier Persian capital was at Pasargadae, about 650 kilometers 400 meters of Ecbatana, but at about the same altitude. Near Pasargadae, Persian emperors Darius, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes Longimanus later built the royal city of Persepolis, equipping it with a large network of underground tunnels, evidently to supply fresh water. Another capital was Susa Shushan, located near the Chospeskaka River in ancient Elam, occupying a strategic central location between Babylon, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. Here Darius the Great built a magnificent palace that served generally as a winter residence, for, as at Babylon, the summer heat at Susa was extreme. However, as time progressed, Susa became more and more the real administrative center of the empire. See Ecbatana. Shushan. Religion and law. The Persian rulers, while as capable of cruelty as the Semitic kings of Assyria and Babylonia, initially at least seemed to have endeavored to manifest a degree of fairness and legality in their dealings with the conquered Pir-Humon-headed bulls near the entrance to the city of Persepolis, Persia, Persian 613 bulls. Their religion apparently contained some concept of ethics. Following their chief god Arimazda, a principal deity was Mithra, who became known not only as a god of war, but also as the god of contracts, the one whose eyes and ears were ever alert to spy out any violator of an agreement. See gods and goddesses. Greek historian Herodotus I, 136, 138 wrote of the Persians. They educate their boys from 5 to 20 years old, and teach them 3 things only, riding and archery and truth-telling. They hold lying to be foundest of all. While the history of the Persian rulers shows them to be not above duplicity and intrigue, yet a basic adherence to some tribal creed of keeping one's word may be reflected in their insistence on the inviolability of the law of the Medes and the Persians. Da 6. 8, 15. As 1. 19. 8. 8 Thus, when Cyrus' decree was found some 18 years after its date of issuance, King Darius recognized the legality of the Jews' position as regards the building of the temple, and gave orders that full cooperation be extended to them. As 6. 1-12. Considerable administrative ability is evidenced in the Persian imperial organization. In addition to the king's own privy council, or advisory board, composed of 7 princes of Persia and Media as 1. 14. As 7. 14. There were satraps appointed over major regions or countries, such as Media, Elam, Parthia, Babylonia, Assyria, Arabia, Armenia, Cappadocia, Lydia, Ionia, and, as the empire expanded, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Libya. These satraps were granted a measure of autonomy in the government of the satrapy, including the administration of judicial and financial affairs within their territory. See satrap. Within the satrapy there appear to have been subordinate governors of jurisdictional districts numbering 127 in King Ahasuerus' day, and within the jurisdictional districts there were princes of the particular peoples composing the district's population. As rate 36. As 3. 12. 8. 9. Likely to overcome the disadvantage of the imperial capitals being somewhat in a corner of the far-flung domain, a speedy system of communication was developed by means of a royal mail service employing couriers riding post horses, thereby connecting the throne with all the jurisdictional districts. As 8. 10. 14. Royal highways were maintained. One ran from Shushan all the way to Sardis in Asia Minor. From Cyrus' death to Darius' death. The reign of Cyrus the Great ended in 530 BCE when he died while on a warring campaign. His son Cambyses succeeded him to the throne and was successful in conquering Egypt. Though not referred to by the name Cambyses in the Bible, he is evidently the Ahasuerus to whom the opposers of the temple work sent false accusations against the Jews, as stated at Ezra 4. 6. The circumstances involving the end of Cambyses' rule are confused. One account, set forth by Darius the Great in his tongue inscription, and recounted by Herodotus and others with certain variations, is that Cambyses had his brother Bardia called Asmodus by Herodotus secretly put to death. Then, during Cambyses' absence in Egypt, a Magian named Gomata also called Asmodus by Herodotus, posing as Bardia Asmodus, usurped the throne and was able to gain recognition as king. While returning from Egypt, Cambyses died, and thus the usurper became secure on the throne. Herodotus 3, 61-67. The other version, favored by some historians, is that Bardia had not been killed and that he, not some impostor, usurped the throne during Cambyses' absence. Whatever the case, the reign of Cambyses ended in 522 BCE and the rule that followed lasted 7 months, ending also in 522 BCE with the assassination of the usurper either Bardia or Gomata the pseudo-Asmodus. Yet during this brief rule apparently a second charge against the Jews was directed to the Persian throne, the king then being designated in O Textoi Acute Murika Longo, Persia, Persian 614 fit the description of the fourth Persian king, who would rouse up everything against the kingdom of Greece. Da 11. 2. Endeavoring to retaliate for the Persian defeat at Marathon, Xerxes launched massive forces against the Greek mainland in 480 BCE following a costly victory at Thermopylae and the destruction of Athens. His forces met defeat at Salamis and later at Plataea, causing Xerxes to return to Persia. Xerxes' reign was marked by certain administrative reforms and the completion of much of the construction work his father had initiated at Persepolis. Compare Is 10. 1, 2. The Greek stories of the end of Xerxes' reign revolve around marital difficulties, disorders in the harem, and a supposed dominance of Xerxes by certain of his courtiers. These accounts may reflect, though in a very confused and twisted way, some of the basic facts of the Book of Esther, including the deposing of Queen Vashti and her replacement by Esther, as well as the ascension of Mordecai to a position of great authority in the realm. As 2. 17. 10. 3. According to secular accounts, Xerxes was assassinated by one of his courtiers. Artaxerxes Longimanus, Xerxes' successor, is notable for his authorization of Ezra's return to Jerusalem with a large contribution for the support of the temple there. This occurred in Artaxerxes' 7th year 468 BCE. Es 7. 1-26. 8. 24-36. During the 20th year of Artaxerxes 455 BCE, Nehemiah was granted permission to go to Jerusalem to rebuild the city. Ne 1. 3. 2. 1, 5-8. Nehemiah later returned for a time to the court of Artaxerxes in that king's 32nd year 443 BCE. Ne 13. 6. There is some disagreement in historical writings with regard to the reigns of Xerxes and of Artaxerxes. Referenced works place Artaxerxes' accession year in 465 BCE. Certain documents give to his father, Xerxes, a reign that continued into the 21st year. Xerxes' rule is customarily counted from 486 BCE when Darius, his father, died. His own first regnal year is viewed as having started in 485 BCE and his 21st year and the accession year of Artaxerxes are often said to have been 465 BCE. As for Artaxerxes, scholars usually say that his last year of rule began in 424 BCE. Some documents present that as year 41 of Artaxerxes' reign, If that were correct, it would mean that his accession year was in 465 BCE and that his first regnal year began in 464 BCE. However, there is strong evidence for calculating the last year of Xerxes and the accession year of Artaxerxes as being 475 BCE. This evidence is threefold. From Greek sources, from Persian sources, and from Babylonian sources. Evidence from Greek sources. An event in Greek history can help us determine when Artaxerxes began ruling. Greek statesman and military hero Themistocles fell into disfavor with his countrymen and fled for safety to Persia. According to Greek historian Thucydides I, CXXXVII, 3, who has gained fame for his accuracy, at that time Themistocles sent on a letter to King Artaxerxes, son of Xerxes, who had lately come to the throne. Plutarchus lives Themistocles, XXVII, 1 gives the information that Thucydides and Charon of Lampsacus relate that Xerxes was dead, and that it was his son Artaxerxes with whom Themistocles had his interview. Charon was a Persian subject who lived through the change of rulership from Xerxes to Artaxerxes. From the testimonies of Thucydides and of Charon of Lampsacus, we can see that when Themistocles arrived in Persia, Artaxerxes had recently begun ruling. We can establish the time when Artaxerxes began ruling by calculating back from when Themistocles died. Not all reference books give the same date for his death. However, historian Diodorus Siculus Diodorus of Sicily, 1154, 1. 1158, 3 relates his death in an account of things that happened when Praxeurgus was a chon in Athens. Praxeurgus was a chon in Athens in 471,470 BCE. O textoi acute muritra longo, Persia, Persian 615 him, at the time of Xerxes' murder, Artaxerxes, his son, was but a child, pure boy, which is true if Xerxes died in 475. Artaxerxes was then 16 years old, whereas in 465 he would have been 26 years old, which would not justify any more Justin's expression. According to this chronology, since Artaxerxes began to reign in 475, the 20th year of his reign proves to be in 455 and not in 445 as it is said quite commonly. Revue Apologetic, Paris, Volume 68, 1939, p. 94. If Darius died in 486 BCE and Xerxes died in 475 BCE, how could it be explained that some ancient documents allot Xerxes a reign of 21 years? It is well known that a king and his son might rule together in a double kingship, or co-regency. If this was the case with Darius and Xerxes, historians could count the years of Xerxes' reign either from the start of a co-regency with his father or from his father's death. If Xerxes ruled 10 years with his father and 11 years by himself, some sources could attribute to him 21 years of rulership, while others might give him 11 years. There is solid evidence for a co-regency of Xerxes with his father Darius. The Greek historian Herodotus 7:3 says, Darius judged his Xerxes' plea for kingship to be just and declared him king. But to my thinking Xerxes would have been made king even without this advice. This indicates that Xerxes was made king during the reign of his father Darius. Evidence from Persian sources. A co-regency of Xerxes with Darius can be seen especially from Persian bas-reliefs that have come to light. In Persepolis several bas-reliefs have been found that represent Xerxes standing behind his father's throne, dressed in clothing identical to his father's and with his head on the same level. This is unusual, since ordinarily the king's head would be higher than all others. In a new inscription of Xerxes from Persepolis by Ernst E. Herzfeld, 1932, it is noted that both inscriptions and buildings found in Persepolis imply a co-regency of Xerxes with his father Darius. On page 8 of his work Herzfeld wrote, The peculiar tenor of Xerxes' inscriptions at Persepolis, most of which do not distinguish between his own activity and that of his father, and the relation, just as peculiar, of their buildings, which it is impossible to allocate to either Darius or Xerxes individually, have always implied a kind of co-regency of Xerxes. Moreover, 2 sculptures at Persepolis illustrate that relation. With reference to one of these sculptures, Herzfeld pointed out, Darius is represented, wearing all the royal attributes, enthroned on a high couch platform supported by representatives of the various nations of his empire. Behind him in the relief, that is, in reality at his right, stands Xerxes with the same royal attributes, his left hand resting on the high back of the throne. That is a gesture that speaks clearly of more than a mere successorship. It means co-regency. As to a date for reliefs depicting Darius and Xerxes in that way, in Achaemenid sculpture Istanbul, 1974, p. 53, and Farkas states that the reliefs might have been installed in the treasury sometime during the building of the first edition, 494,493. 492,491 BC. This certainly would have been the most convenient time to move such unwieldy pieces of stone. But whatever their date of removal to the treasury, the sculptures were perhaps carved in the 490's. Evidence from Babylonian sources. Evidence for Xerxes beginning a co-regency with his father during the 490's BCE has been found at Babylon. Excavations there have unearthed a palace for Xerxes completed in 496 BCE. In this regard, A.T. Olmsted wrote in History of the Persian Empire p. 215. By October the 23rd, 498, we learn that the house of the king's son, that is, of Darius' son, Xerxes, was in process of erection at Babylon. No doubt this is the Darius palace in the central section that we have already described. O textoi acute miritra longo, Persia, Persian 616. Xerxes following the death of his father, but indicate an accession year during his co-regency with Darius. If that accession year was in 496 BCE when the palace at Babylon for Xerxes had been completed, his first year as co-regent would begin the following Nisan, in 495 BCE, and his 21st and final year would start in 475 BCE. In that case, Xerxes' reign included 10 years of rule with Darius from 496 to 486 BCE and 11 years of kingship by himself from 486 to 475 BCE. On the other hand, historians are unanimous that the first regnal year of Darius II began in spring of 423 BCE. One Babylonian tablet indicates that in his accession year Darius II was already on the throne by the 4th day of the 11th month, that is, February the 13th. 423 BCE. Babylonian chronology, 626 BC AD 75, by R. Parker and W. H. Dubestein, 1971, p. 18. However, two tablets show that Artaxerxes continued to rule after the 11th month, the 4th day, of his 41st year. One is dated to the 11th month, the 17th day, of his 41st year. p. 18. The other one is dated to the 12th month of his 41st year. Old Testament and Semitic Studies, edited by Harper, Brown, and Moore, 1908, Volume 1, p. 304, Tablet No. 12, designated CBM, 5505. Therefore Artaxerxes was not succeeded in his 41st regnal year, but ruled through its entirety. This indicates that Artaxerxes must have ruled more than 41 years, and that his first regnal year therefore should not be counted as beginning in 464 BCE. Evidence that Artaxerxes' longimanus ruled beyond his 41st year is found in a business document from Borsippa that is dated to the 50th year of Artaxerxes. Catalogue of the Babylonian Tablets in the British Museum, Volume 7. Tablets from Sippa II, by A. Lichty and A. K. Grayson, 1987, p. 153. Tablet designated BM 65494. One of the tablets connecting the end of Artaxerxes' reign and the beginning of the reign of Darius II has the following date. 51st year, accession year, 12th month, day 20, Darius, king of lands. The Babylonian Expedition of the University of Pennsylvania, Series A Cuneiform Texts, Volume 8, Part A, by Albert D. Clay, 1908, pages 34, 83, and Plate 57, Tablet No. 127, designated CBM 12803. Since the first regnal year of Darius II was in 423 BCE, it means that the 51st year of Artaxerxes was in 424 BCE and his first regnal year was in 474 BCE. Therefore, testimonies from Greek, Persian, and Babylonian sources agree that Artaxerxes' accession year was 475 BCE and his first regnal year was 474 BCE. That places the 20th year of Artaxerxes, when the 70 weeks of Daniel 9:24 begin to count, in 455 BCE. If on the basis of Daniel 9:25 we reckon 69 weeks of years, 483 years from 455 BCE, we come to a significant year for the arrival of Messiah the leader. Counting from 455 BCE to 1 CE is a full 455 years. Adding the remaining 28 years to make up 483 years brings us to 29 CE, the exact year when Jesus of Nazareth was baptized in water, anointed with Holy Spirit, and began his public ministry as Messiah, or Christ. Luke 3. 1, 2, 21, 22. Down to the fall and division of the empire. Regarding the successors of Artaxerxes Longimanus on the throne of Persia, Diodorus Siculus gives the following information. In Asia, King Xerxes died after a reign of 1 year, or, as some record, 2 months. And his brother Sogdianus succeeded to the throne and ruled for 7 months. He was slain by Darius, who reigned 19 years. Diodorus of Sicily, 1271, the original name of this Darius, known as Darius II, was Ocus, but he adopted the name Darius upon becoming king. He appears to be the Darius referred to at Nehemiah 12:22. Following Darius II came Artaxerxes II Caldeman, during whose reign Egypt revolted and relations with Greece deteriorated. His reign, dated as from 404 to 359 BCE, was followed by that of his son Artaxerxes III, also called Ocus, O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, pestilence. 617 kings in Egypt, who initially appear to fill the role of the symbolic king of the south. Da 11. 4-6. The Seleucid kings were restricted to the western part of their domain by the incursions of the Parthians, who conquered the territory of Persia proper during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. They were defeated by the Sasanians in the 3rd century CE, and the Sasanian rule continued until the Arab conquest in the 7th century. The prophecy of Ezekiel 27:10 includes Persians among the men of war who served in the military force of wealthy Tyre, and who contributed to its splendor. Persia is also listed among those nations forming part of the hordes directed by the symbolic Gog of the land of Magog against Jehovah's covenant people. S38. 2, 4, 5, 8, 9. Persis, Persian woman. A beloved Christian in Rome, whom Paul greets and commends for her many Christian works. Row 16. 12. Peruda P. Root R from a root meaning separate. Forefather of a family of Solomon's servants. Also called Perida. As 2. 55. Ne 7. 57. Pestilence. Any rapidly spreading infectious disease capable of attaining epidemic proportions and of causing death. The Hebrew word for pestilence comes from a root meaning destroy. 2ch 22. 10 In numerous texts, pestilence is related to the execution of divine judgment, as regards both God's named people and their opposers. X 9. 15. New 14. 12. S 38. 2, 14-16, 22, 23. Am 4. 10. See plague. Brought by abandonment of God's law. The nation of Israel was warned that refusal to keep God's covenant with them would result in his sending pestilence into their midst. La 26. 14-16, 23-25. De 28. 15, 21, 22. Throughout the scriptures, health, either in a physical or in a spiritual sense, is associated with God's blessing. De 7. 12, 15. PS 103. 1-3. PR3. 1, 2, 7, 8. 4. 21, 22. Re 21. 1-4, whereas disease is associated with sin and imperfection. X 15. 26. De 28. 58-61. Isla 53. 4, 5. Mount 9. 2-6, 12. Joe 5. 14. So, while it is true that in certain cases Jehovah God directly and instantaneously brought some affliction on persons, such as the leprosy of Miriam, of Uzzah, and of Gehazi, New 12. 10. 2ch 26. 16-21. 2 Chi 5. 25-27. it appears that in many cases the diseases and pestilence that came were the natural and inexorable results of the sinful course followed by persons or nations. They simply reaped what they had sown. Their fleshly bodies suffered the effects of their wrong ways. G 6. 7, 8 Concerning those who turned to obscene sexual immorality, the apostle says that God gave them up to uncleanness, that their bodies might be dishonored among them, receiving in themselves the full recompense, which was due for their error. Row 1. 24-27. Israel affected. Thus, God's warning to Israel in effect told them of the many ailments that a course of disobedience to his will would inevitably produce among them. His law given to them served as a deterrent and a protection against disease, because of its high moral and hygienic standards. See diseases and treatment accuracy of scriptural concepts, also because of its healthful effect on their mental and emotional state. PS 19. 7-11. 119. 102, 103, 111, 112, 165 Not an occasional infraction of that law, but outright abandonment and rejection of its standards is what Leviticus 26. 14-16 describes, and this would certainly make the nation vulnerable to all manner of disease and contagion. History, both past and present, bears testimony to the truthfulness of this. The nation of Israel fell into gross apostasy, and Ezekiel's prophecy shows the people speaking of themselves as rotting away because of their revolts and sins. S 33. 10, 11. Compare 24. 23. As foretold, the nation experienced the sword and the famine and the pestilence, this reaching a climax at the time of the Babylonian invasion. J 32. 24 The frequent association of pestilence with sword and O textui acute miritra longo, Peter 618 Jehovah's protection. King Solomon prayed that, when menaced by pestilence, Jehovah's people might pray to him for relief, spreading out their palms toward the temple, and receive favorable hearing. 1 Chi 8. 37-40. 2 Ch 6. 28-31 Jehovah's ability to protect his faithful servant also against spiritual harm, including that of the moral and spiritual pestilence that walks in the gloom, is comfortingly expressed in Psalm 91. Peter Peter a piece of rock. This apostle of Jesus Christ is named in 5 different ways in the scriptures. By the Hebrew Simeon, the Greek Simon from Heb. Root meaning here. Listen, Peter of Gr. Name he alone bears in the scriptures, its Semitic equivalent Cephas perhaps related to the Heb. Ke middle dot in rocks used at Job 30. 6. J 4. 29, and the combination Simon Peter. Act 15. 14. Mount 10. 2. 16. 16. Joe 1. 42. Peter was the son of John, or Jonah. Mount 16. 17. Joe 1. 42 He is first shown residing in Bethsaida Joe 1. 44 but later in Capernaum Lu 4. 31, 38, both places being located on the northern shores of the Sea of Galilee. Peter and his brother Andrew were engaged in the fishing business, evidently associated with James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were sharers with Simon. Lu 5. 7, 10. Mount 4. 18-22. Mr. 1. 16-21 Thus, Peter was no lone fisherman but part of an operation of some size. Though the Jewish leaders viewed Peter and John as men unlettered and ordinary, this does not mean they were illiterate or unschooled. Regarding the word grammar does apply to them, Hastings Dictionary of the Bible 1905, Volume 3, p. 757 says that to a Jew it meant one who had had no training in the rabbinic study of Scripture. Compare Joe 7. 14, 15. Act 4. 13. Peter is shown to be a married man, and at least in later years, his wife apparently accompanied him on his missions or some of them, as did the wives of others of the apostles. 1 Co 9. 5 His mother-in-law lived in his home, 1 He shared with his brother Andrew. Mr. 1. 29-31. Ministry with Jesus. Peter was one of the earliest of Jesus' disciples, being led to Jesus by Andrew, a disciple of John the Baptizer. Joe 1. 35-42 At this time Jesus gave him the name Cephas Peter. Joe 1. 42. Mr. 3. 16, and the name was likely prophetic. Jesus, who was able to discern that Nathanael was a man in whom there is no deceit, could also discern Peter's makeup. Peter, indeed, displayed rock-like qualities, especially after Jesus' death and resurrection, becoming a strengthening influence on his fellow Christians. Joe 1. 47, 48. 2. 25. Luke 22. 32. It was some time later, up in Galilee, that Peter, his brother Andrew, and their associates James and John received Jesus' call to come and be fishers of men. Joe 1. 35-42. Mount 4. 18-22. Mr. 1. 16-18 Jesus had chosen Peter's boat from which to speak to the multitude on the shore. Afterward Jesus caused a miraculous catch of fish, one that moved Peter, who had at first shown a doubtful attitude, to fall before Jesus in fear. Without hesitation he and his 3 associates abandoned their business to follow Jesus. Luke 5. 1-11 After about a year's discipleship, Peter was included among those 12 chosen to be apostles, or sent forth ones. Mr. 3. 13-19. Of the apostles, Peter, James, and John were several times selected by Jesus to accompany him on special occasions, as in the instances of the Transfiguration scene Mount 17. 1, 2. Mr. 9. 2. Luke 9. 28, 29, the raising of the daughter of Jairus Mr. 5. 22-24, 35-42, and Jesus' personal trial in the Garden of Gethsemane Mount 26. 36-46. Mr. 14. 32-42. These 3, plus Andrew, were those who particularly questioned Jesus about Jerusalem's destruction, Jesus' future presence, and the conclusion of the system of things. Mr. 13. 1-3. Mount 24. 3 Though Peter is associated with his brother Andrew in the apostolic lists, the record of events more frequently pairs him with John, both before and after o textoi acute miritra longo. Peter 619 Peter's expressions basically were born of active interest and thought, coupled with strong feeling. That they are included in the Bible record is evidence of their worth, even though at times they reveal certain human weaknesses of the speaker. Thus, when many disciples stumbled at Jesus' teaching and abandoned him, Peter spoke for all the apostles in affirming their determination to remain with their Lord, the one having sayings of everlasting life. The Holy One of God. Joe 6. 66-69 After the apostles generally had replied to Jesus' question as to what people said about his identity, it was again Peter who expressed the solid conviction. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, for which Jesus pronounced Peter blessed, or happy. Mount 16. 13-17. Peter's being foremost in speaking was matched by his being most frequently corrected, reproved, or rebuked. Though motivated by compassion, he committed the error of presuming to take Jesus aside and actually rebuke him for foretelling his future sufferings and death as the Messiah. Jesus turned his back on Peter, calling him an opposer, or Satan, who was pitting human reasoning against God's thoughts found in prophecy. Mount 16. 21-23 It may be noted, however, that Jesus looked at the other disciples when doing this, likely indicating that he knew Peter spoke sentiments shared by the others. Mr. 8. 32-33 When Peter presumed to speak for Jesus on the payment of a certain tax, Jesus gently helped him to realize the need for more careful thought before speaking. Mount 17. 24-27 Peter revealed overconfidence and a certain feeling of superiority over the other 11 when declaring that, though they might stumble in connection with Jesus, he would never do so, being willing to go to prison or even to die with Jesus. True, all the others joined in making such affirmation, but Peter did so first and profusely. Jesus then foretold Peter's threefold denial of his Lord. Mount 26. 31-35. Mr. 14. 30, 31. Luke 22. 33, 34. Peter was not just a man of words, but also a man of action.